Okay, I have 6 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Irvin?
Here.
Counselor Fleck?
Here.
Counselor Merriday?
Here.
Counselor Savage?
Here.
Counselor Stennett?
Here.
Mayor Solstein?
Here. Okay, item 3, design criteria for the Main Street revitalization project.
Start out with me, please. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So on August 30th, 2022, the City of Cottage Grove received approval notification for a $5 million grant to fund a rebuild of the historic Main Street from 8th Street to the bridge over the Coast Fork of the Willamette. The city will match the EDA grant funds with an additional $1.25 million for a total of $6,250,000. The Main Street Refinement Plan, which was adopted by the City Council in 2015, will guide much of the project scheduled to begin in the fall of 2023 or spring of 2024. The project includes street repaving, frontage improvements, new water and storm sewer utilities. These improvements include new sidewalk, new curb and gutter, pervious pavers, and revised parking areas, water main, water services, storm sewer, manholes, double lamp posts, vehicle poles with signals, pedestrian poles, crosswalks, street trees, water fountains, new pavement, striping, and other improvements such as fiber network cable. The EDA Main Street Revitalization Project will address another key component of the need for Main Street upgrade is the lack of compliance with Americans with Disabilities Act. So Branch Engineering is ready to start the construction drawings and is needing direction on the following 3 outstanding design elements, which were not finalized in the 2015 Main Street Refinement Plan. The first is street and sidewalk width. Branch Engineering has created 3 conceptual drawings. The first shows the street and sidewalk as it is today, 9.5 feet wide. Sidewalk with 8-foot parking lane, 14.5-foot travel lane. The second option or design concept is with 12-foot sidewalks and 8-foot parking lane and 12-foot travel lanes. And the third shows a 13.5-foot sidewalk, a 7.5-foot parking space lane, and 11-foot travel lane. City staff created perspective drawings to show the fit of pedestrians, parked vehicles, and traffic. The width of the sidewalks will provide guidance on the next 2 design elements. The second element is corner bulb outs. The addition of bulb out corners is needed to achieve sidewalk and crosswalk ramp compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. All crosswalks will feature pedestrian ramps, grade improvements, and audible signals where signals are warranted. The bulb outs will be at each intersection downtown and will provide space for a designated crossing area with wheelchair turnaround ability, a more visible pedestrian crossing, and reduction of the speed of traffic. With the addition of bulb outs, there will be an impact on the turning radius and reduction in the traffic speed through the corridor. There are 3 examples to choose from. Choices listed are designed at the 12-foot sidewalk, which is not meant as a preference. It was just created using the mid-width option. The first one shows the maximum bulb out. This design includes, and I should quantify that, it's not a maximum bulb out, but it's the maximum that Branch Engineering is proposing. This design impacts both Main Street and the side streets. This option allows for wheelchair maneuverability and increased visibility of pedestrians on Main Street and side street crossings. The second drawing shows the bulb out on the side streets only. While this allows for an easier wheelchair maneuverability, it does not address the visible need at the Main Street crossing. And Third shows the bulb out on the main street only. This option will address the wheelchair mobility and pedestrian visibility. Included in your packet is also turning radiuses for each option. We have provided examples for a 40-foot delivery vehicle, a school bus, and a 50-foot tractor trailer. And the final design concept is street trees. The drawings provided include the street tree locations as they are today and the conceptual drawing and future placement. In the conceptual drawing, you will see options of as few as 2 trees to as many as 5 trees in a city block. The guidance we are looking for is the amount of trees, placement, and management. We will need to take into consideration the business signage, awnings, entrances, curbside parking, and historical neon signs. The street trees chosen will be under the advisement of David Doherty, the landscape architect at DLA Inc., and reviewed by the Ag Grove Urban Forestry Committee. Branch Engineering has partnered with DLA for expert advice on the tree wells and landscaping necessary to ensure the health of the trees while preventing damage to the buildings and sidewalks. At this point, I'd like to share that Damian Gilbert, the city engineer record for the city with Branch Engineering, is here this evening to walk you through all the concepts and to hopefully answer satisfactory questions.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. As Faye said, I'm Damian Gilbert. I'm with Branch Engineering. Been there 25 years. I've worked with the city for over 10 years on and off, helping Bradsby with various things such as traffic engineering, structural engineering, surveying, other things, kind of on an as-needed basis. And this past spring was fortunate enough to become your contract city engineer. I think most of this was pretty well covered. One thing I wanted to clarify is in those cross sections, we wrote preferred and alternate, and that's just the preferred option and an alternate option. It's not that we preferred. We're here to give you whatever you need, basically, every time.
Yeah, just interrupt for a second. Dallas, I think we're getting quite a bit of feedback from your microphone. Is it possible for you just to mute it until you want to ask a question?
Totally.
Thank you.
So that's for the cross sections, and I probably don't need to go into too much detail about just the benefit of adding anywhere from 3 to 5 feet of sidewalk width for walkability, pedestrian activity, access to businesses, ADA compliance and such. The street trees, I wanted to definitely address. The first round that I had sent out basically met your city code for new streets, and that was every 30 feet in a street tree. That's a lot of trees, and definitely will, could be perceived as interfering with visibility of businesses. And of course, there's benefits to having trees, such as shade, and it looks nicer and feels nicer and keeps things a little quieter. But at the same time, we definitely don't want to put in more than you want. So that's one of the items we're looking for some guidance on. And then finally, the bolt curb extensions. I can definitely make something work without them. I want to be clear about that. There are ways to design ramps that you basically walk across the ramp as you go around the corner, but those ramps will consume all of the sidewalk width up to the corner building. So without the bolt curb extensions, you really end up with a pinch point at the corners and lack of area for pedestrians to stop and wait for cars and things like that. Widening out makes the ramps a lot easier to fit in. There's clear space behind the ramps, more pedestrian staging areas, places for planters and things like that without interfering with actual federally required ADA access. I know one of the things I typically run into is just concern for vehicles to be able to get around a corner. And it's a valid concern, and the way these are laid out, it doesn't really interfere with vehicle tracking. Because there's kind of an effective turning radius that starts with the parked car and ends with the parked car. And in a way, it might improve vehicle access, large vehicle access, simply by controlling where the vehicles can park rather than parking up really close to the crosswalk. So I just wanted to put out all three options, and again, we're here to make you guys happy with the final product, not necessarily push these ideas on you. From a pedestrian standpoint, the curb extensions are great, wide sidewalks are great. From a business owner standpoint, I think very similarly. We just want to make sure that there's comfortable amount of space for larger vehicles and everybody to park, things like that. So not a whole lot to really go over anymore, other than I really want to answer some questions.
Questions? Councilor Fleck.
So, and thank you for coming tonight. I was on the council when this original discussion happened, and it was actually pretty passionate about the plan. A lot of the pieces of it we're not going to be able to do because obviously this is smaller. So the America, All America Square designs and those sorts of things, which I loved, are not going to happen, which was kind of unfortunate. In this, I would say the bulb outs, it's funny, back then the street width was a huge issue for me. And back at the time, it was explained to me that when the crown is gone, that street won't feel as tight and that you could go to narrower lanes. So I'm not necessarily as stuck on that. One of the other pieces was the trees. At that point, we were talking about keeping or losing the trees. At this point, I think consensus should be that all of those trees need to go because they are not the right tree for the situation. And I'm trying to remember, was it Homestead where the foundation was actually crumbling from the tree roots? Yeah, so obviously we don't want that. Then again, if we do the wider sidewalks, we have more room for that. So I guess I'm actually pretty open as far as trees and where I would like to see some for sure. But I agree. I think every 30 feet or yards or whatever it was is excessive. So I'm certainly open to less of those. I guess the bulb outs is kind of the one piece that I'm still sticking with. And thank you, Mr. Stewart, for talking with me the other morning. At that agenda session, I was actually asking, can we go with the smallest bulb out that will still achieve what we're looking for the ADA? Because I guess when I look at the turning radius diagrams that you have, it causes me some concern. We have school buses, we have fire trucks. Even though we don't have an awful lot of big truck traffic, Homestead does have an 18-wheeler that comes periodically and drops off items. And so I guess I just want to try to accommodate whatever potential could be there. What worries me a little bit is the ramp idea is great. I've seen it in other cities where, it goes up. But here's the thing I'm wondering from a enforcement standpoint. So a police officer sees somebody driving over that, even though that's their only way to navigate that turn, technically, isn't that a pedestrian safety area that they should not be traversing?
Yes. Technically, I think somebody could be cited for driving off the road. I'm not sure that would happen.
It's one of those discretion things as well. They can't make that turn, they're not going to do it. But if it's obvious that they were driving wrong, when you look at the video, no side anybody driving on the sidewalk, they're
And they completely destroyed that curve.
They destroyed it 3 times.
Mhm.
Rebuilt it several times. So that's what happens to trucks.
Mhm.
They're gonna do that.
Okay.
And when you build it, more than likely you're gonna have thicker concrete. A lot of art anyway, so it's gonna be built like a driveway with 6 inches instead or 8 inches instead of 6. So we won't be able to load. The one of the inches in the steel plate, you know.
So I guess what I would say for council discussion is if we go with the bulb outs, I would suggest the shorter width ones on Main Street, you know, to give a little bit more right away. Or is it on both? I remember it's 28 across the main and 24 across the side streets. Is that correct?
Side streets vary.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point.
And I would add, and we defer to Damien, but it's my understanding these are probably close to 6 foot bulb outs. You can make the bulb outs
A little smaller.
respectively smaller, maybe take another foot or 2 off of them and reduce the.
I think that would be my preference, just for a compromise where we're meeting ADA, but we're also, you know, limiting the impact on bigger vehicles. Thank you.
Counselor Stennett?
Do we know how many large vehicles come through Main Street? How many long trucks, et cetera?
You have long trucks that come through and drive straight through. Generally, they'll come down from, they're coming, either going out to Lorraine or coming back in to Lorraine. And the intent and the hope is that they'll turn on River Road or they'll turn on 9. Watching them turn on 6th Street, or south on South 6th Street off of Main Street is ridiculous. But the last truck that actually I was sitting there at the intersection around loaded log truck for that quarter, rattled straight along the light pole there on the corner of South 6th and thought the lamp was going to go through your window. Yeah, then pedestrian sign and everything else around. We followed him out as he wanted to put down his logs and warehouse through. And he was following his GPS. He was from Sweet Home and he was following for a project to warehouse through and never hauled here before. We're looking at ways to try to see if we can get some notation on the GPS systems that these are the places to turn, don't turn here. But yeah, they got to learn it. But there's much better places for them. If you get turned on River Road, got right out there and could have turned on 99.
Can we indicate that with signage before they get downtown?
I'm not sure on the sign issues, whether I know there's some limitations on designating truck routes and stuff under state law, but that's also an option. Here's your turning place, turning south. Our streets would be another issue. That would be
One thing I would like to add, just based on both comments, is really this is an opportunity to get on Main Street what you want on Main Street. I don't necessarily think we have to be in a position where we're just accommodating, say, transient truck traffic and such just because it's there. We can actually decide we either want trucks turning here or we don't, and design accordingly.
Counselor Savage?
Thank you so much, and so sorry for the shuffling of papers earlier. The question I have in regards to the bulb outs is, I recently was in Jacksonville, and they have, I don't know if I necessarily call them bulb outs, but they are ADA compliant, but they are most definite curbs. So it's also a tripping hazard. And so while following ADA, it's also creating a pretty extreme handicap. And from what I understand on Friday in our agenda session, these bulb outs that are being proposed at street level are quite literally at street level, and then they very smoothly go up. So there is no tripping hazard. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, it could be. There are different ways to design ADA access. We could design these without ramps and have it at grade. It'll take a lot of street amenities to address the ADA. The way you see these drawn right now would be standard ramps with flares, very similar to probably any ADA ramp you've seen in, say, a new subdivision or something like that, where you have a ramp down, you have flares that tend to be in the neighborhood of 3 to 6 feet wide, where it gently goes up. But what you're seeing here, the double outline, is actually intended to be a continuous curve that drops down with the ramp flare to no height, and then comes up, say, a few inches in between. And that's purely for wayfinding, for visually impaired, is why you have this controlled opening like that. So if we don't have that controlled opening, then we need to work really hard to create something that does consistent wayfinding.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, what I saw in Jacksonville is a controlled opening, but probably at a greater degree.
Probably at a greater degree. There was an era, there's a few of these in downtown Springfield also, where people took a few of the ADA guidelines a little too literally, and you'll see just a big round curve in between two ramps. And maybe that's what you're talking about. That's definitely not the intent here. These would be soft wings of a ramp. So you have a flush area with wings that transition down gently. Very similar to what you have out there today, except those are just too steep and too abrupt.
Thank you so much for that. And I had one more question, not in regards to the ramps, and that was ultimately I'm leading to the width of the sidewalk, the width of the street. But my question is, what is the standard width of a big log truck? Because that's going to be the biggest thing, you know, a big semi truck pulling a whole big load. That's going to be the largest thing that rolls down Main Street. And if we have one going east and one going west, it gets to be a tight squeeze. But I hear what you're saying, that we get to make it how we want it. So do we want that? I don't know, but do we have a standard size for log truck?
I usually provide for at least 9 feet if they're not moving. Generally, you're going to have an 8 to 8.5 foot wide truck with parameters. So if you're moving, you want a couple of feet of separation on each side. 12-foot travel lanes are very nice. 11-foot travel lanes that you see in the alternate option. What it tends to do is accommodate those larger vehicles, but slows down traffic just because it feels tighter. And so you get a little bit of benefit out of the narrower lanes, but yeah, two log trucks passing each other, even on a standard width, can be tight. Personally, I like the idea of slowing down big trucks, and if the intent is to make this a walkable corridor. The one more thing just came to mind is it doesn't have to be all or nothing either. You notice that there's an option for bulbs just on Main Street, for instance. There could be an option for bulbs just on the side streets that may prevent trucks from turning, if that's something you want to do. Or if there's a specific street that there's business owners that need truck access, we can keep that one wider also. I don't think we're looking for an answer for all those levels of details, but maybe some direction on preference, and then authority to staff to work out those details.
I just thought of one more question, and this may be more of a question for Mr. Stewart. Just so I can get a mental picture of sizing, do we have what the existing sidewalk to sidewalk is on, like, say, 6th Street, which feels incredibly tight when you're turning onto it? you've got parking on either side, but that kind of gives a good example, but I don't know those measurements.
Well, I'm seeing a I did not put a dimension there. If you look on the bulk drawings, there are dashed lightened lines that show the existing curb width. And other than adding about 7 or 8 feet to it, based on me eyeballing it, I'm guessing they're probably in the range of 30 to 32 feet.
Yeah. When I measured on this rudimentary with our GIS mapping, they're approximately 33 feet. So you'd have parallel parking of 8 feet on each side, and then you have an 8.5 foot travel each lane is what I came up with, 33 feet.
Thank you. That helps.
Councilor Irvin?
Thank you, Ms. Madam Mayor. I'm still trying to put a visual together for the bulb out wings. If there's the travel lanes, the pedestrian travel crosswalks, is there a flare up in the middle at the apex of it?
Yes.
And so
Between the two ramps, you would have, it's usually around a 2 to 4 inch rise.
okay.
So it'll flare down from the sidewalk, come level with the street, and then there'll be a little bump there that's, like you say, 2 to 4 inch rise. And that's to help, hypothetically, if you had somebody that couldn't see, they'd be able to feel that they were in the right space for which crosswalk they want to use.
Oh, so that's a required part.
Yeah. or provisions to, excuse me, accomplish the same thing with other design.
So on the map here on the drawing, you see that little triangle. These are the ramps that are straight that match up with the crosswalk. This little triangle piece right there is where the rise goes up. You can see it's somewhat of a contour line there. There's a smaller triangle inside of it to show the highest point.
Councilor Stennett?
Thank you. Do you think, personally, professionally, that 7 feet is enough parking?
No.
Is 7.5 enough?
To me, I don't think it is, honestly.
Especially with a narrower travel lane.
Considering especially the types of vehicles that we're dealing with on a regular basis. I've spent a lot of time down here, and there's plenty of full-size trucks.
Do you think we need 8 feet?
I think 8 feet is a better number.
Thank you. Can I ask you another quick one?
Yes.
Do we know how long the blocks are? How many trees on the block is 30 feet? Every 30 feet?
I think it was 6, I think 30.
That is a lot, isn't it?
It is.
Okay.
I would share that it looks like most of the blocks that were planted originally with trees, it looked like the majority of them had 5 per side.
So I just assumed we were also only talking about changing the width of Main Street, not any of the side streets. Is that, I just want to verify that that's correct, because that would create some real challenges. And yes, when you think about people can park anywhere from, up to 18 inches away from the curb. Oh yeah, I would absolutely not want anything less than 8 feet for the parking lanes. That was it.
I'm not sure where this would fit in, but I did spend a lot of time just talking to people on Main Street, business owners. I tried to get to as many as I could, and I carried the papers around with me on the second and final days of it once they became available. And I would just want to share a few things that I learned. And I think most people, a lot of people don't know, we just leave it as it is. There's that sentiment. There's also the sentiment that you know, if you have a hospitality business, you want as much sidewalk as you could get. So you can have things in front of your business. If you're not planning on using the sidewalk, they tend to stick with the existing size of sidewalk. So it seems most people, when I presented the options, could live with the 12-foot sidewalk, the mid-range. They could see both sides. Yeah, we could live with that because we still have fairly wide travel lanes and fairly wide parking lanes. The wide sidewalk was only of interest to someone that wanted to put as much business on the sidewalk as possible. There was a lot of fear about can we survive the construction, and I think that was answered by doing the block to block and not tearing up the whole street and leaving it open, and that could alleviate that. But they were still wondering if there's any way of funds available to support struggling businesses, because the fear is, if we try to fix it, are we going to kill it? You know, that was among a lot of struggling business owners. The bulb outs, there was the most disagreement on. That was the most contentious item. And I thought a point made, everybody admitted that pedestrian safety is not good on Main Street as it exists. So that was one unifying point that everyone could agree on. Pedestrian safety is not good in the current thing. So whatever option we choose that emphasizes pedestrian safety, I think everyone could come around to live with. And lastly, just one thing in particular that's of personal interest to me and several people that I've spoken to is the sparkly sidewalks that exist in front of Homestead Furniture. That is something I noticed immediately walking down Main Street first time at night, and many people have told me how that's part of their childhood. So I'm wondering if, and it's mentioned in the Appendix E of the 2015 report, Figure 4, cited that those sparkly sidewalks. So I'm wondering if that can be incorporated into the design at this point. The sparkly.
I have a feeling we can find a way. There's a lot of courts around here. I'm guessing that's how it gets clear.
And it was explained to me by Rob Scoggins that it was glass that was worked in. So, yeah, but that could be, I mean, that sidewalk's the best on Main Street, actually, that right in front of Homestead. And then timing of construction, if we could time it during the slow season, that would be optimal to business owners, because when it's slow, you're not as affected so much by loss of people that would be intimidated by construction. So anyway, those were the report from the street.
Thank you. Councilor Urban?
Yeah, to just summarize my conclusions of what I'm supporting would be keeping the road, the Main Street width the same, as a concession using bulb outs, but only on the side streets. And then want to explore removing the trees, but replacing them just in that bulb out area on the side streets. I'd like to look at some more older photos, but there is an appeal to a really nice facade, like when you look down the Main Street and you can see all the facade, especially with the multiple stories. Don't want to lose the feel of trees downtown, so I'd like to explore how that could go. And if they're not in front of the buildings, they're less likely to track in the tannins and the leaves and be less of a mess for the business owners. Those were kind of my starting points.
Okay. Councilor Savage?
Thank you so much, Mayor Soulsby. On that note, Councilor Irvin, I have heard how people love the trees because it provides shade, and that by removing the trees, there are restaurants on one side on the street that are just getting hit with the sunlight. And if we remove those trees and don't replace them, it's going to be absolutely unbearable through the glass. So there's two different sides to that, and I just wanted to point that out as well. I'm not in disagreement. I'm just playing both sides.
Well, I too talk to a lot of the business owners, and being business owners ourselves, we definitely downtown have a lot of opinions, and I'm going to be of the point of view that we definitely need to compromise here. And as Dana was saying, I do think most people having businesses and the people that frequent downtown are willing to do a compromise too. As long as another thing that I heard is let's keep it as historic as possible to our look. I would like, if we're going to do the bulb outs, I would like to see them as minimal as possible. I am in favor of side streets only, and I'm sorry, Main Street only, not side street. And because the side streets, living on 6th and Main, 6th is pretty tight. And I like, and the trees, they're kind of the sacred cow to a lot of people. However, being a business owner that we've had to maintain them, and when the leaves and being tracked in, just like Councilor Urban said, can be a big pain. And so I would like to see us compromise on maybe doing 2 trees per block. So that would fit in with, but and I do understand, like I know some of the restaurants do like that shade, but I think when I look down, I was telling Councilor Fleck, I was upstairs looking down Main Street today, both directions, and a lot of our trees have been cut down now because they were diseased or what have you. And so they were 5 trees to a block, but now many blocks only have 2. And so as you leave and go out, you take a look at that and you'll see that it still gives some nice shade. And I think that would be a really good compromise. And then I also had a question for our expert. So what we get from a lot of constituents is they're wondering, is it a possibility, is it legal to take out our lights and do 4-way stops?
The short answer is not necessarily. Putting in an all-way stop is there are a lot of them out there, and most of them probably shouldn't be there. There's federal guidance when you can and can't have an all-way stop, and the 2 criteria that are used the most to put one in is this intersection warrants a traffic signal. We are creating a funding process to get that signal built. The signal takes a year to build. Not everyone has $300,000 laying around for a traffic signal, and it's considered a temporary measure. The other one that is widely used and appropriate is nearly equal traffic volumes of the 2 crossing streets. Other than that, really minor streets are supposed to be stop controlled and major streets are not. And there's all sorts of studies and data about why you don't put a stop sign up when it's not justified or not typical. The biggest one is the people that you want to stop are generally going to be the speeders. The speeders are either going to be annoyed by stopping for no reason and speed up, make up for lost time, or start disregarding the stop sign, which is unsafe. So there's, I guess, this abbreviated longer answer.
Thank you. I also do support the in-between plan to the 12 and a half foot sidewalk would be my choice. Councilor Fleck?
So one other quick question, streeteries, are we going to continue streeteries? And if so, what is the width of those currently? Because I'm wondering if they're now too large.
They are still 8 feet.
Yeah.
8 feet?
Yeah, so they're built 8 feet wide, and what they'll accommodate is about 6 inches sits on the curb. So actually, they would only stick out 7.5 feet if you go at the 8 foot wide parking.
But it does boil down to a decision of council whether
are we going to continue?
do you need street more.
Yeah, and I guess just for position, I guess I'm kind of like Counselor, and I'm sure your soul's beat up. Sorry, I'll get used to it. I actually kind of like the compromise approach of the 12 feet. Originally, I was adamantly opposed to it, but I think that the situation's changed. I actually can live with the 2 streets of block as well. I think some trees would be good, but I also want to respect that we're hearing from the folks who actually are owning the property and running businesses downtown. So I want to acknowledge that. And at bulb outs, as long as they're as small as possible, I do also have some concern on the side streets because we've been mentioning 6th Street over and over again. I don't know, would it help or hurt? Because it almost seems like the bulb out would push that first parking spot back, which actually would improve the turning on 6th. But maybe you can shed some light on that.
Certainly, we can do a lot of things with bulb outs. What I did here was, I guess, a fairly traditional one, and then pulled it in a couple of feet. You will see plenty of them where the outer curb matches the vehicle, where the vehicle is parked. I think at these intersections with no center turn lane or anything on either side, I think that's a little too much. So I pulled them in 2 feet. And you're exactly right, where if you look at the tracking, it's very similar. If you have the bolts on both sides, it will make it a little more difficult. But again, we can pull those apart, and we could have a 1 foot bump out to attempt to control cars if that's something that you wanted to do.
So I think actually on the side street might be advantageous where it actually would help that turning radius. Now, once again, this was something we talked about the other day too, is that we're going to lose a little bit of parking space with these bulb outs, correct?
Possibly. Not on Main Street necessarily. It seems to be pretty well, cars are parking compliant generally on Main, at least from what I've seen. It doesn't mean it's all the time. Side streets, you'll probably lose, if you were to measure it, half the parking space. I don't know if that gets averaged out down the block. I haven't measured all those parking spaces yet, but the side streets would definitely help with keeping cars away from them.
So I think I would support a minimal bulb out on both streets, the side streets and Main Street.
Yeah, some of the contributing factors in the thought process of the road width was that if you do have a maximal Main Street road width, that helps the arc the most. And then when you start pushing, the further you start pushing into that, especially for a longer vehicle that with a trailer or something, that's what's going to catch and trail. So that was kind of the pairing in my mind, the pairing of the widest street, which would mean the not expanding sidewalk, but then pushing cars the furthest away from that turning radius on those side streets, which you could accomplish with a minimal bulb out, minimal pinch in the width of the road, but pushing, maximum pushing of the cars. That makes your turning radius really the most you can do, and which I would think is the least frustrating, the least, really pinching maybe someone trying to back up on Main Street if they can't make it, kind of situation. The other part was something that Mr. Scoggins mentioned, which was he was showing as it is existing, one of the big, I think they're 53 footers, the tractor trailers, full size. They park basically right on the double yellow, and that's the maximum for someone that can still get out of their vehicle since they're parked there a while if they're parked and it doesn't impede the other traffic. So if that's the case, then narrowing the street or widening the sidewalk effectively makes that a more dangerous situation. I don't foresee that, I don't think they can do anything about the alleys. I don't know. I know I've heard and thinking about different situations. So I was kind of pairing all those things together, going, you can't really narrow Main Street. And then the other concession, because I really do like the look and the feel, like inviting, coming downtown, making it an event, which why I was favorable to the idea of sidewalk or stop signs, as well as the bringing of the road up. And I was wondering, I think I've seen an ordinance where you can't have roll curbs, but the idea was, how do we minimize the curb so that when you do open up the whole street, when you do a 4-car race downtown or whatever, like you can kind of naturally flow into Main Street if you want. You can shut it down for an event or something like that. So that even though your sidewalks aren't as wide, if you do clear cars off of it for an event, it kind of it just becomes an entire event space, which would kind of counter the need for wider sidewalks. So those were some of the contributing factors on that pairing of same width, bulb outs on the side streets, and then your plants, your trees, which you might even be able to do a different species if it wasn't like right in front. I'm not sure how that'll work, but those were the contributing factors to that pairing.
Something I'd like to remind you guys is that all of our, I believe, loading zones are on our side streets. So 6th Street, for instance, it's 2 parking spaces and a loading zone. So we would definitely, I would think, lose 1 parking spot. No, Denny doesn't think so. Okay.
If I can follow up on this octagons, the stop signs. I didn't really follow that there was two things that warrant putting, it sounded like putting in a traffic signal versus, but when you said warrants a traffic signal and then nearly equal traffic volumes?
Yeah, the typical 2 that are used, there's an array of other circumstances, but they're kind of obscure. I don't remember them off the top of my head just because they're very rarely used at all. One is a temporary means when it warrants a traffic signal, you can put in a four-way stop, but it's an interim control until the signal is installed.
Oh, it's an interim step. Okay.
And then the other one is fairly equal traffic volumes. Otherwise, it's basically defaulted to just a 2-way stop control for the side streets.
Okay. And when R goes through and down the road, can we foresee factors that would contribute to is there an equal percentage? Is there some variance in that? To where if your downtown really becomes more not a route through town primarily, not the most expedient, path. I guess at some point there's a lot of downtowns that have stop signs. Are they grandfathered in?
Yeah. The interesting piece, and I'd have to dive into this a little more, is as part of a signal system, we could put a traffic signal at pretty much every intersection or every other intersection without meeting certain safety or volume or delay warrants. And for some reason, you can't do that with the stop sign. It's a strange one, but then again, you can warrant traffic signals and put in a stop sign as an interim measure. I don't know where that becomes abuse of the standard to put one in for this traffic signal that it's warranted and you want to install, but you're never going to install. That's I guess the only way around it that I can think of, and I've never seen that used. But realistically, the character of the road will be what it is, depending on what you do with the widths of the road, the streetscape, and most importantly, parallel routes for trucks if there's a way to go around it, so you don't have people just traveling through downtown as a way to get from Lorraine to 99 or however that may be. If it truly becomes I'm driving to Main Street to shop and park, that's probably about the time where you would see more equalized volumes and probably put four-way stops about anywhere. And it's kind of a cart before the horse or which came first situation. It's hard to, I guess, anticipate where the stop sign would be needed.
Well, wouldn't we be replacing the existing, under this proposal, we're not reusing the existing traffic signals, electronic ones, are we?
Yeah. Yeah, so the intent is to refurbish the existing ones because they have the historic feel to the, provided they're structurally and, when we go through the refurbishment, provided they structurally sound and all they need to do is be blasted and recoded. The intent is to reuse the existing poles on 5th and 6th Street to support the traffic lights. And then what we're planning on doing is getting similar poles as close as we can that were back in the 30s. We have light pole fixtures that are very similar, except for they don't have the traffic lights on to bring in the additional lighting downtown.
That's good.
Councilor Flack?
I just want to clarify, I've heard stop signs a couple times. I absolutely do not support switching from lights to stop signs. So that's going to be one of those I'm a little more rigid on. I drive that every day, and I would really, I know that there would be many folks that would be very frustrated. And I think about, when there's a train and traffic is backing up, I think that's going to create some real challenges. So that's not one I could support.
Councilor Stennett?
Thank you. I like the compromise of 12, 8, 12. Is that about an extra 2.5 feet of sidewalk? I think it's a lot beneficial to a lot more than just the hospitality businesses downtown. That's the accommodation of more people downtown, which should be our goal, I think. Currently with benches, trash cans, trees, it's hard to walk more than 2 wide anyway. You have to line up single file to get through certain spots, and I think let's do something about that if we can. It seems pretty obvious. I'd support it for the hospitality reason too, obviously, but I don't know if we could go a couple trees per block and then some nice shrubberies between. I think there were some plans for some other plants. Are we planning to get at least curb cuts where they don't exist on the side streets? I know there's a few where there's just no way to, you just kind of got to dive on that curb.
Curb cuts for just crossing the street.
Well, there's like on the other side of the accident, there's no cut there, just the curb.
Oh, I see. We can put them pretty much anywhere, especially if it's near like loading zone or something like that. You're just talking about like a ramp that's not necessarily an ADA ramp.
There's just spots where the curb just dies at a corner and there's no way to get off that curb onto anywhere.
That's where is that where the alley is back there? I don't know if this project is going to go. I mean, the original refinement plan was to
We're not going that far.
Washington. This, because of the amount of money that we were encouraged to apply for, is focused right on Main Street. We are doing a bike and pedestrian plan. It's underway, and what we're hoping to do is, in that plan, they'll have a recommended ADA plan for upgrading, just like a capital improvement plan for water, sewer, and storm. It'll say, hey, there's a lot of use downtown. It'd be great if we improve the ADA accesses exactly like that for, that curb cut that extends on down to put in ADA approved ramps.
Councilor Savage?
Thank you so much, Mayor Soulsby. If we're going back to the trees, I hear it being proposed where we could have a tree every 30 feet, equaling 6 trees per block. And then I hear, let's compromise at 2 trees. I'm not sold that 6 and 2 are the compromise. There's got to be somewhere in the middle. I would like to see somewhere near 4, but something Councillor Stinnett just mentioned would actually be even more of a compromise than that, and that is incorporating bushes and greenery outside of trees. So I'm actually really glad that you said that, because I could see, for instance, 2 trees if we had 2 bushes somewhere in the block as well. Are bushes being incorporated, or are we just talking trees, greenery?
I believe at this point we were just talking trees. I guess it comes back to, staff is recommending that if we move forward with trees, that council would direct the staff and the city to essentially manage and maintain those trees on a yearly basis. If we put trees back there, they need to be pruned yearly, they need to be taken care of. I don't want to go so far as saying that we'll blow the leaves every day off the sidewalk. It might be a challenge, but I do think it's important for us to manage that. Now, if we were to incorporate bushes, we need to make sure that the bushes are in the proper places, because they actually become a more of a visual issue if they're closer to where the crosswalks and the boulevards are. I would be concerned about them being located to where, I think we have one right now on Main Street at the corner of 7th and Main there, by the Oxford Fiddle. There's a bush there that in the past, if it's unmaintained, you can't see through it, so it's hard to make your visual needs to maneuver your vehicle. So I think that would be a concern. And then as long as they're properly placed so that people can open their car doors and everything, I'm not opposed to it.
Thank you.
Councilor McDade.
Trees, I think, is a way that instead of having a set hard and fast rule every so many feet, is the right placement of the right tree. So preparing the site so that they're not going to affect foundations by having a tree well, and then place them accordingly so they don't block a neon sign, they don't block a facade. Put them where they need to be instead of following a straight formula. Say 2 to 4 trees per block or something like that, according to aesthetic placement or use. It's very important that we keep the flow open. Like Councillor Stinnett was saying, you have to really pay attention on our current sidewalk. There's bike ramps, there's trash cans, there's all kind of obstacles that you have to navigate throughout the sidewalk. So flow is very important if we want it to be a viable gathering spot. So we can't just think everything all over the sidewalks. If you're going to open up space, we have to have space to move and flow. So judicious placement of the right tree.
Okay. Well, it's 6:59. Anybody have one more little question? No? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting.